All right. Well, we have reached about 6 or 7 minutes after the hour, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Um, I'm Jennifer Brandlin. I'm the director of communications for the Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary, based in Oregon, coming to you through the miracle of Zoom. We're going to begin with a prayer, so I'm going to ask Brian if he can screen share our prayer for today. So please join me in calling ourselves to the presence of God. God of love, awaken our gifts and unique talents so that we may spread your good news throughout the world. Bless this time that we may learn how to best connect with people where they are, touching their hearts in ways that renew relationships and resolve challenges. Thank you for your light and wisdom that inspire us to good works, which reveal your presence in and among us all. Let the people say amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Brian. So I want to welcome you and thank you for your presence. I am very happy to be introducing Marsha Wallander. She is a person with an unmistakable passion for fundraising, and especially for direct mail. Her drive to find resources for mission-based causes goes back pretty far, starting with church fundraisers and her high school band trip to Toronto, which the students drove forward in the absence of a well-financed parents club. To this day, she loves values-based development work, and she has a great delight in understanding the data behind effective fundraising campaigns. She comes from a marketing background and is a great storyteller who also believes in offering and accepting mutual aid. She knows she stands on the shoulders of others and is happy to lend a helping hand to others as well. So with that, I'll ask you to please help me welcome our webinar presenter, Marsha Wallander.
And thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. And I really do have a passion for fundraising. I don't think I realized that, but as my schooling went on and career went on, 30 years later, here I am fundraising, and I love every day that I come into the office. But this is one big piece that really, when I first started in fundraising, that I worked on in a number of my careers, and just really want to be able to share some of the nuggets of knowledge I've learned over the years. So I'm so happy you could join us today. If we want to go to the next slide, to the goal of today is really just providing you with some tools and concepts so that you can implement a successful program. And my goal always is to increase response rates and decrease costs. And so hopefully I'll share some things with you today that will help you do that. As I've shared with the CWR team, this is a very high level program. This is a presentation I had put together a number of years ago, and it was about a 4-hour presentation. Don't worry, you won't be here for 4 hours, but it's scaled back to 1 hour. So there's a lot of information. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. It's pretty high level, but please know that a lot of this slide presentation will be made available to you, as will some examples that should help you. So I'm happy to share that. The other thing I like to share is that, sometimes when you're in a smaller organization, sometimes you look at this and think this is not possible. But I can tell you the strategies that I'm sharing with you today are things that I've used in very large organizations like Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh Foundation, where we were raising $23 million a year, all the way down to a smaller organization called Family House that raised a couple $100,000 a year. And so these strategies are really strategies that work in a large organization, a small organization, in a university. Some examples I have today are from a Catholic university, or with the sisters who I work for now. So please know that when you see these examples, it's not just geared, it's the content and not specifically what they're talking about. But I will tell you, any place I've ever gone, they always work. So to the next slide, direct mail is a strategy. With 70 to 99% of people telling us no, right? When we send out a direct mail response rate, why do we keep sending it? And the next slide will tell you because it works. And while only 1 to 30% respond, those numbers, dollars, and donors are really the base of everything else we do in fundraising. And so if someone doesn't respond, you're still giving them an inexpensive or giving them a really great story about your organization. The other nugget that I learned years ago, and I've tested this, and I challenge you to test it in your organization, is we lose about 70% of our donors over 5 years. So if we are not replenishing that group, if we are not building and building acquisition into our programming, then we really need to think about that. So those are just some pieces of information. I think we all know these things. Why do people, on the next slide tells you about why people give to nonprofits. They feel a connection. Someone asks to make a difference, for recognition, not always. Usually it's more for compelling reasons, but, certainly for support and sometimes for tax reasons. And then the next slide talks about why we don't give to nonprofits. And this is, I think, a good thing to focus on when you think about direct mail. Solicitation is infrequent. They don't feel wanted or needed. Maybe they weren't thanked. They don't know or think your mission is compelling. They may not have received the mailing or the ask at the right time. So these are a few things we'll talk about today. And on the next slide, I will tell you all of these things of why people give or don't give are all able to be addressed in a good direct mail program. And if you say or think that your last direct mail letter didn't answer any of those questions, then you might need to rewrite it. So the next slide talks about direct mail strategies and the schedule. So the best time to ask is really October through December, often the last week of December, certainly in September at the beginning of the giving season. And these are really ranked in order. Through March and May, we like to ask again in the spring. And then if you happen to have a fiscal year that is not the December end of year, but perhaps it's March, June, or another time, September, then that's another time to ask donors to consider making a gift. In a small organization, and I looked at the previous year's number, and they were triple what they were that year. They were almost $100,000 in honor memorial giving. And so when the board did the budget, they expected us to raise that again. Well, that year, 3 board members, family members passed away. And so there were a lot of gifts that came in that were not solicited, but were because of that situation. So it's important to understand how that money comes in. It could be thrown under direct mail in some organizations, but it really needs to be defined as not solicited, because you don't want to be responsible for raising that money again the next year, right? If you had really not the ability to control that money coming into your organization. But we do count honor memorial giving. You can also increase it through your publications, and then a donor listing mailing, which is something we send out at the end of the year to check on people's giving, if their name is listed properly and where they've given, and does that fit into the giving categories. So those are little things that we like to talk about with the budget. I'm not going to go into detail, but I will say, this is the kind of budgeting that we do for our direct mail program and for all of our fundraising, that talks it into pieces so that you know and understand where your costs are in printing and postage and mail house costs. And then on the flip side, you have a sense of whether you know or not what it's going to bring in. Give it an estimated guess. If it's acquisition, national standards are about a 1% response rate. For your own organization, if you don't know it, start tracking it. So in the future, you can start tracking what your response rates might be. And we'll get into a little bit. But this shows you a little bit of a development solicitation budget and what pieces and how they fit into it. The next slide shows you another type of budget, but it is development not solicited. So those are the honor memorial gifts. Those are the envelopes that you put in your community's magazine. So those are the types of things that have a cost, not as great of a cost, but there's a cost of printing the envelope and some other things. We also talk about residual mailings that also go back up under solicitation. And those are mailings that may be, I've seen envelopes as old as 10 years old coming back to an organization. So we don't count it in that, we've stopped counting that campaign, but we do count it as a once upon a time solicitation. And then of course, postage. If you're not mailing nonprofit, please do, because the savings is tremendous. You're looking at something for first class at 55 cents versus 11 cents. And I'm surprised that the number of organizations who aren't necessarily using the nonprofit postage. So next we move on to direct mail strategies, the data. I can't stress enough. I think I'll probably say that about most of these points, but data, people take direct mail very personally and seriously. I remember receiving a piece of mail from my mother who had passed away years earlier. I know with my name, Marcia, former name Milnarski Wallander, a lot of times my name was misspelled. And I think all of us can think of a time that they've received something from someone and something's wrong. And you just think, how didn't they know that? Well, those of us on this side of that letter know that when you have 5,000, 10, 50, or 100,000 people in your database, we don't always know when someone passes away, so we can't update the record. But to the best of our ability, using the NCOA, the National Change of Address, using tools through your database to really make sure that names are correct, addresses are correct, people aren't getting 3 mailings. Data is very important, and it can take a lot of time to go through, but it will be worth it, especially when you look at what you call people. We have we had a big review of our database to make sure that if Sister Judith is sending the letter to sisters, or a sister is sending something versus if I'm sending something, those salutations might be different. We certainly don't want a situation where we call a bishop Mr. So there are a lot of things that we need to make sure are taken care of in the data. The next slide, segmentation, another very important thing that helps us reach out to donors and to people we're asking to support us in a way that we know who they are. And so the two big pieces of segmentation usually fall into donor. They've either given, not given, given a lot, given recently, never given. So donor segmentation, and then constituency. And if you're not tracking this in your database, I highly encourage you to do so. It's knowing who the person is and what their relationship is with the organization. So when you're writing a letter, you're not saying, dear friend, you're saying, dear Mary. As a Felician associate, we know that you understand the significance. So again, if you have an organization, a college, we need to know that as an alum, we know that you understand the importance. So it's really understanding who people are and how they connect with us. And then that also can change your letter to them. A patient letter certainly is very different than a member in a community. So in the next slide, this is something that I hope you print out and keep by your side every time you establish a direct mail segmentation. So this is called segmentation by giving. This is something I developed years ago, and I will tell you, as you'll see later on in the presentation, that segmentation is so important. If you're sending out direct mail and just counting the response rate and the renewal rate and all of those things and what people gave and average giving, and it's all lumped in together, I beg you to change it today in your next mailing, because you will see in a few slides that it's so important because there's so many different response rates. And so this is a group that I've created, and it's not anything different than what most people have done, but I've seen in the last 5 years that recency in giving, and it started back in 2008 with the big crash when people stopped giving. We saw major donors stop giving. We saw a lot of people scared of not knowing what they'd have month to month. But what we did see was an increase in monthly giving. We did see that people were giving smaller dollars more frequently. That continues today. And that was something I tested out in these segments that we created that are basic segments for direct mail. Sometimes people call them side bunt and lie bunt and all sorts of things. This is basically what I what I boil it down to is a current donor who's given in the last 3 months, a recent donor or renewal who've given in the last 4 to 12 months, a lapsed donor from 13 to 24 months ago, a former donor, which is a little bit of a new thing, that is someone who gave, but not in a while, 25 to 48 months ago. Anyone who has given 49 months ago or greater, I really just call that reacquisition. We want them to know we know they had given at some point, but it's really reacquisition at that point. And then, of course, acquisition are people who've never given. So if we could go to the next slide, we see testing. And again, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but I've had a lot of bosses, I've had a lot of board members who've given me advice on a lot of things in fundraising. And if it's something that follows or could be in the realm of best practices, I'll test it. I had a boss once tell me that she insisted we have pictures in every direct mail letter we send. And if it's not an appropriate picture, if it doesn't relate, if it's not compelling, if it's not a good picture, you really shouldn't include it. So I did some testing, and we found that there was no difference in including a picture or not including a picture. We found that there was a difference in including a PS. I had another boss who hated PSs. She was very much into formal English and grammar, and said that a PS just meant that the letter was not well thought out, that you forgot something. And that's just not the case in direct mail. PSs are very important. In fact, PSs show a significantly higher rate if it's a well-constructed PS in your direct mail programs. Ask amounts. I've done various testing and ask amounts, and in this organization with the Felician Sisters, for the first time, I did a test that I've done in many other organizations that was the opposite. And the test is this: when you're looking at acquisition and donors, you always put in an ask amount. And so I always do a test of a high ask and a low ask. And it's just giving $15, $20, or $25, or it's asking for $25, $100, or $500. In most organizations, you'll raise more money from more donors by asking for higher amounts, which is counterintuitive, but it's true. This is the first organization I've worked in where it's not true. And so what I share with you is, if you have a list of 15,000 donors, pull out 1,000. You need a pretty good amount to really test something. And if you have a theory, or if you want to know something, that's a great way of finding out, because we can talk all we want about it, but until we ask our donors, we really don't know what the answer is. So I really, these are some things that I've tested over the years. Next slide talks about messaging. Again, if you have those segments, you will be able to segment your donors and then provide very clear messaging. We need to let donors know in that first paragraph, we know who they are. You know, we know that they're an alum. We know that they just gave. We know who they are. So here's the part that I'm going to go through an actual direct mail letter. You will get this letter. This letter is from Carlow University, and it's a Catholic organization that I worked for about 5 years. And the direct mail program more than doubled by using some of these strategies. This is just taking it piece by piece. So this letter that I'm sharing with you right now is sent to a renewal donor, someone who's given in the last couple years. And so the donor starts with, "You are amazing. Each year you take the time to read our letters. You stop what you're doing and make a difference in the life of a student. You give." So in that very first paragraph, I'm letting that person know we appreciate them, that we know that they're taking time to do what they do. They're reading our information and they're giving. And at the same time, I'm telling them they're making a difference in the life of a student. So again, in that very next paragraph, you're among a group of, and you can merge that in, of alumni, of friends, of sisters, of whoever that group is, who understand the importance of the mission of Carlow. And then we talk a little bit about the Carlow women, the Sisters of Mercy, who started the university. But then we also are introducing a new president. So there's a lot going on in this letter, and it's all intentional. Very third paragraph, your gift of. We let them know what they gave because most donors don't remember if they gave that year and if they did what they gave. So we merged that in. Your last gift helped to make a profound impact in the lives of students. You'll also notice some italics. You'll notice some bolding. You'll notice sentences or paragraphs with 1 or 2 sentences, which goes against everything Miss Vandenberg taught me in English, but it works in direct mail. Next slide. Continue the letter. Then we talk about a student. We talk about, we make it personal. We talk about her experience of not being able to attend, why she's thankful to be a Carlos student, and the money she received. And then again, we go back to the donor. How you have helped so many people, because it's about them, it's not about us. Next slide. Again, it's, we often write things so it's not I, but certainly in direct mail, it's about you, the donor. And so we continue to talk about how they've played a vital role, and it's written in that tense, you, your ongoing commitment. And now we need to build on our momentum, and we ask for another gift. And we ask them for a gift amount. And again, statistics and tests show that when you're asking donors, especially previous donors, for a specific gift, they typically give that or more. So then we come to the closure of the letter. Please consider the gift today. Thank you in advance. And it's signed. This is also important, who you want to sign the letter. There's all sorts of statistics out there, and I think it depends on your organization. And sometimes we would mix it up. With the Polynesian Sisters, we most typically have it come from our provincial minister. For our mission Haiti, we typically have it come from our sisters who are at the mission. So it depends on your organization. And again, I go back to testing. But for our purposes, most people want to hear from the sisters. And so we sign the letter. And then on the next slide, I will tell you, this is probably the second most important thing you do, is add a PS. And it's not just any PS, it's a well thought through PS. That PS has to sum up that entire letter. And it also has to have a sense of urgency to say, make your gift today. And again, statistically and through testing, we see that. We also know that more often than not, a 2-sided letter outperforms a 1-sided letter. We also know that people read the first paragraph, flip it to the second page, and read that PS. So again, make it important. Now, what do we have at the bottom? Over the years, and I have some samples of this to share with you. Over the years, we tested, we looked at cost, we looked at reliability. Children's Hospital had a mailing go out one year, and that buck slip, which is this, the response with the name and the donor information and donor giving amount, went the automatic machine, which sent out the 100,000 pieces of mail, stuck, and everyone from the letter D on received the wrong buck slip. So when I have an error, when something like that happens, I pull people together and ask, what can we do to have that not happen again? And so at Children's Hospital, I had the wonderful opportunity of having a large group of people to mail to, 150,000 people each year. And so that provided me with a lot of testing ability. It also provided me with a very, very good connection with the direct mail house, because we were one of their top businesses. They were very willing to sit down and talk with me. One of the things we talked about was that very piece of information I shared, not to make a mistake. And I was looking at costs. I was looking at the amount of money we were spending and what the average costs were from our mailings. And so the two of us really, and with our graphic designer, worked through a process and a design that I use to this day. I shared with Brian and Jen earlier or yesterday that same sample is being used by St. Jude and many other big organizations. And so I think, and it's effective. So it's an 8.5 by 14 piece of paper that's paperweight, copy weight, only thick enough so you don't see through to the back side. It's perfed at the bottom. There's a perforation that the mail house puts on the bottom of the paper, so donors can easily tear off that bottom piece. So the way I construct my direct mail letter is this. The front of it has variables. Obviously, the address, the giving information, who the donor is, as an alum, as a patient, as a friend. The back side is all the same. So we have to construct the letter so that when they flip it, everything on the back of that letter is going to be consistent with every donor we send to. That saves a lot of money. In my first year at Children's, we saved over $40,000 with direct mail costs. And then the second thing that we did was we used a window envelope so that that letter now can be automatically sent into a window envelope and it will never be wrong. So those are two key things that I've tested over the years that will help you save a lot of money and also make sure that the donor is receiving the correct information.
Marsha,
So
we
sure.
have received a question about segmentation.
Yeah.
Dusty Krikow would like to know, how do you randomize your testing segments to ensure valid results?
That is a great question. So for example, if I am testing, it depends on what it is. You know, some mail houses will just do alphabetically. I don't agree with that. If you're, for example, interested in testing a high-low ask amount. So what I do then is when I do a renewal, okay, so people who have given, I first sort everyone by their last gift amount. So you'll get greatest to highest. So everyone gave from 10, then 20, then 50, 100, 1,000. So you would sort it by gift amount. Then I put in an A/B so that people are sorted randomly. Then I pull the two tests. You know, test A will get a higher level of an ask and test B will get a lower ask. So there are formulas you can put into your Excel spreadsheet that will also automatically increase or put those 3 asks in. I recommend 3 asks. I like to include the ask amount that they gave last time and then 2 higher. Some people put in a lower. I don't agree with that. Test it. But that's how I would do it. If it is, but I would also say, if you are segmenting your donors like we are by constituency. So if I was at a university, I might segment alum into one group and segment them by gift amount and then friends in another. Because you'll see in my later reports that there can be a huge difference between, say, people who've received your services, a patient versus someone who hasn't. Did that answer your question? If you could give us a quick yes or no. Okay, I'm going to keep talking, and if I need to clarify, let me know. So on this, we call it a buck slip, is the yes, I want to help. And this is the form they fill out. Make it easy. Whether you use a separate form or an attached form, please always include as much information as you can. The donor name. And actually, it's a really good practice because then you can also show what you have in your database and ask people to make corrections. You put in the last gift amount. If they're not a donor, you make up the gift amount. Surprised me is something I picked up at a conference a few years ago, and I tried it. Oh my goodness, people loved it, and we ended up with, to date, I think my largest direct mail gift through a direct mail piece is now $50,000. But you can get some really great surprises, and it's something that helps people think beyond what you're asking them to give. We start including email addresses. And again, asking for an update. If you have a merge field with email addresses, what you can do in the fields of people who don't have an email address is you can put something in that field for all those donors that says, please help us go green and share your email address. Or you can put in something that will print on all these pieces. We have actually started taking credit card numbers off our buck slips because we don't want to have that information, and we're encouraging people to give online. If you do ask for that information, I caution you to keep that information locked and deleted as soon as you receive it and process that credit card. Next slide. This is the back of the letter. On the bottom of that 8.5 by 14 sheet, there's often room. I suggest either this, or I have When I was at the hospital, the volunteer services might have a need for volunteers for certain things. So create pieces that fit into number 10 envelopes. Share something exciting with people. This was something exciting. We were ranked in the top 20. For the Felician Sisters of North America, I share information. People still sometimes are confused that we had 8 provinces and now we're 1. So I might put information about Our Lady of Hope province and that type of thing. I might be sharing something that's going on with our Felician Mission Haiti, but use it as an opportunity to provide information to people or to brag about something that didn't work in your compelling story, but it's something you want people to know. Next slide. So when I write the direct mail letter, I immediately write the donor thank you letter. Most of the time. There's some days I don't, but make sure your donor thank you. If you go to all this time to write these letters, please go to all that time to write the thank you letter. And if they're responding to your ask for a gift, then make sure your thank you letter matches it. So once again, let them know you know who they are. Once again, you've taken the time to read our letter and made a difference in the life of the student you gave. So that matches quite well to the introduction to the solicitation letter. It doesn't need to be long, but there are some IRS guidelines that tell you what need to be in that letter. And if you don't know them, you should look them up. There's an irs.gov website just for nonprofits, but things like the full name of the person, it has to be on your letterhead as an organization. You need the amount of the gift. You need the date of the gift and the intention of the gift. You also need to say on the bottom of that letter, no goods or services were received for that gift. So again, you're letting people know how important their gift is. So this is a donor thank you. The next slide, I'm not going to go into as much detail, but it's here for you to review. But this is a twist on that letter. So I can't say the same thing to someone who has never given, right? They know they haven't given. So you have to let them know they haven't given. So this opening is a little different. You're still extraordinary. You're not amazing, but you're extraordinary. But you're an exceptional, you're among this group of people, who graduated from Carlow University, who were touched by the Sisters of Mercy. You are a Carlow University graduate. So again, I don't know, they've not given, but we need a powerful opening. And then we go into a little bit of what's going on. And the next slide, we still outline the things that we had done earlier with the PS, with the buck slip, and with everything else. But that opening needs to be very different. So how do we say thank you? We say thank you for making a difference. We say that they've taken action. We repeat a little bit of what they saw in that letter, and just let them know how much we appreciate their gift. So the next slide, this I thought I'd give you a current example. As I've shared earlier, oh my goodness, in the last 15 years, and for all the places I've volunteered to help with direct mail writing, because I kind of like it. It's all the same. You'll see different stories, you see different things, but this is the example of that 8.5 by 14. It's the example of 2 sides. We did a lot more on this backside than I typically would do. But it was such a cute, impactful story that people were so touched that some of these kids in Haiti, they're 5, 8, 10 years old. They've never had a brand new pair of shoes. For many of us, we can't even imagine that. So that was something we put on the back with a quote. This, as I've shared, came from our sisters in Haiti. But if you read through it, you can see some of the things we highlight for Felician Mission Haiti. So if we want to go to the next slide. Okay, so why is this all important? It really matters. So this is a really good example of a direct mail report that is a real report. And this is how it was broken down. So you can see spring 2010, fall 9. So this was in a fiscal year. So a few things I want to point out to you. One is when you look at donor renewal, this was for an organization that we served a population. For a long time, they did not solicit this population of people because they didn't feel they had the capacity to give. While that was true of a certain segment, we removed that segment because we knew who had certain financial, kind of like if you think of a school lunch program, we removed anyone at a poverty level that we had knowledge of. But we segmented these into donors, regular people, friends, and then we segmented it into guests. We then segmented by giving when, renewal, lapsed, and this reacquisition. And so you can see I circled, when you look at donor renewals, first of all, you see the response rate was about 7%, 6.89%. You see a lapsed donor, which was 13 months to 3 years, drops to a third, 2%. And then when you look at people 4 years and beyond, they drop even less to 0.62%. So you can see why, if you average what that donor response rate was, it wouldn't be accurate. So by knowing when people gave and segmenting that way before you do the mailing is so important. You also see a big difference in the gifts, right? You see the average gifts, but you see that the renewal people gave the greatest amount, about $8,500. Now, when you look at the guests, though, look at the difference. Same segments of donors who gave recently lapsed and reacquisition, but you see, 18% versus 6%. That's huge. But you see that it's somewhat of the same type of breakdown of lapse and renewal. So you see some consistency that, okay, once you get beyond 13 months, man, that drops down about 3 times. So again, up above in the donor and down below the guests, it's still 3 times as much, which is interesting, I think, more, but interesting. You also see that our guests had a much higher response rate of 18.69%, but they gave about $8,000 in line with our regular donors. So they're giving less, $20 less as an average gift, but they're certainly more passionate. When you look down below and people ask me when to mail, our spring mailings, whether I was at Children's, Carlo, the Felician Sisters, with the exception of this year, which I'll talk about, it's always like this. Most of my money was always raised in that October through December, always. So when you look down at the fall mailing, you see the spring mailing brought in a total of 21,000. The mailing, well, it was mailed to more people in the fall, but that was intentionally. The giving was $75,000. So even if you break it down to half, which is about, we mailed to twice as many people, it's still considerably higher than what we would raise in the spring. And it's just the time of giving. Looking at the rates again, you see tremendous differences. You see that the donors gave about 14% who'd just given that year. When you get to lapsed, it's even less than it was in the spring, down to 2%. So that's 7 times less. That's a lot. So I can't tell you how important it is to keep those donors who have just given this year on track. We're seeing new numbers with the Felician Sisters, and I have some new reports that I can share with you, but I didn't get them into this presentation, that I now have a segmentation of people who've given in the last 3 months. Then I do renewal 4 to 12 months. And what we see is the people who've given in the last 3 months are 3 times more likely to give than even people who've given in the last 4 to 12 months. I know this is a lot of numbers and statistics, but it's so important. Again, when you look down below at the fall giving, again, 9% responded, and still greater than people who had given in lapsed or much further out. So next slide. This is something for you to print out and look at. I know we're coming close to the end of our session, but this gives you a really good overview of a direct mail program. It breaks it down a little bit more with the donor listing mailing. That's simply something we send out in May to say, hey, you've given $893, Mr. and Mrs. John Smith, and our giving levels are 5 to 1,000 and 1,000 and above. I consider it a courtesy, because we started doing this because we had a couple board members who had no idea they were close to this 1,000, 5,000 other ranges, and were not very happy that they didn't get up to those levels. So this, and another thing was so important to understand how people want to be listed. Again, a lot of doctors that I've worked with in 15 years of healthcare, And sometimes I'd get those back that say they didn't want Dr. Alan Smith, they wanted Marianne and Alan Smith. And for us, acknowledging people, it's so important to acknowledge people the way they want to be acknowledged. So it's a great piece. Again, some things I've already shared with you about the differences, but a little more of a bigger report that you could take a look at, that you can also see my notes to the side of what I thought was important about that report. And that's really the big bulk of what we're talking about today. Understanding when you've done all of this and sent it out, to be prepared to analyze it, understand how people responded, because it's the only way you'll make it better. And I can tell you, in all these 30 years, every place, small, large, Catholic, not Catholic, these strategies have taken direct mail programs to double, triple, and quadruple their responses. So I wholeheartedly support them. I just wanted to share a couple notes, if we can go to the final couple slides. This was our campaign that we sent out for Giving Tuesday. I just wanted to touch upon Giving Tuesday just a tad. Lovely email campaign. These are 3 different emails that we had sent out before, during, and after Giving Tuesday. Beautiful need, stating the crisis in Haiti, the reality of Haiti, what their dollars can do. This follows every textbook message I've ever done. This campaign brought in about $8,000. It's a lot of work. The next year we thought, okay, let's do this again. We have more emails. What are we going to do? $9,000. I was sharing with the hosts earlier that we're not doing our Giving Tuesday campaign this year. It's oversaturated. We're trying to put a square peg into a round hole, and I just don't believe it's working. Sadly, there was that tragic earthquake that just happened this year. Last year, there was a tropical storm that happened in Haiti. Instead, we did emails that were current, that were relevant, that were outside of our very detailed plan, but they went in line with what was going on in the world. And let me tell you, last year's campaign brought in $40,000 in one email in 2 days. This year's campaign brought in over $30,000. Did I say 40,000? 40,000 last year, 30,000 this year, and we're starting to get checks in the mail. So I can't tell you not to do a Giving Tuesday campaign, but I would test it. We're choosing not to, because we don't think it's in line with what we need to accomplish. But did want to share a really nice visual that we did with them. And then the final slide is just really having a really good response envelope, that if you're not sending, I hope you consider sending in your magazine, in your, if you are in a different department, if you're development and there's a communications department, if you're all the same, then please, my goodness, create a nice response that tells you a little bit about a mission or something that's going on, and then gives people away. For every single publication we do, we break more than even. Those envelopes come in. We put this under the unsolicited part of our budget, though, because this is not a direct ask, but it's important. And I think that's it. Last slide just gives you my information and how to contact me. If you want to shoot a direct mail letter to me, it might take a few days, but I'm happy to review it and give you comments. If you need a quick call, I'm happy to speak with you, because I think it's so important what all of you do and what we all do together to make a difference. And that's what we're doing, making a difference in the world through these direct mail programs and fundraising. So I'm always happy to help. People help me when I got started with sharing materials. And so please, I'm happy to do the same.
Marcia, we do have a couple more questions to ask, if you're willing to answer them live.
Absolutely. If I can, I will.
All right. Tessa Barnett would like to know, would you ever ask a donor on the letter how to properly address them?
Sure. We would do that. Good. That's a really great question, because if you notice, and we might not be able to go back, but in that buck slip or on any of our pieces of mail or forms, we always include, depending on your organization, sister, father, brother, doctor, miss, Ms., Mix. I mean, there are so many different ways, but we typically will add a line that will say under their full name, as you would like to appear in our donor listing. But you could certainly say, or how you would like us to address you. But absolutely, people, I think, feel pleased that you care to ask them.
Thank you. And then we also have another question from Dusty. She wonders if you have any stats on whether the beautiful HTML emails work better than a standard style email directly from a sister or an employee's email address.
I do not, but that's a really good thing to test. And I think I will write that down and test that next time. Yeah, I mean, I don't, but I think that's a really good question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions out there that you'd like to ask via chat or the Q&A, folks?
Again, please feel free to follow up with me. I'm happy to help.
Well, unless I see another question pop up, I am going to just start off by thanking you so much, Marcia. You have clearly checked the box that says, yes, I want to help. I would like to say that those of you who've participated in our CWR Academy session back in January may recall that Marcia and her colleague Dina Swank gave a presentation based on their integrated marketing campaign that won an award at last year's CWR annual conference. The Felician Sisters of North America are fortunate to have you as their Chief Mission Advancement Officer, and CWR is very fortunate to have you as a member and a resource to the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
For all people out there who are not currently part of CWR's Development and Advancement Resource Group, you can contact Ginny Heiser at the CWR office to be added to the list for future educational opportunities. And I would like to remind everyone that a survey will be sent out later today. Please do share your input about our program. It really helps us to evaluate and plan educational programming going forward. The slides and the video of today's program will also be shared in the near future. Coming up next for our Academy is a session on Wednesday, September 22nd, and it'll be part 2 of our conversation about successful collaboration between communicators and leadership teams. And it'll be co-sponsored with UISG. Ginny or Brian, do you have anything else to add that I may have forgotten?
I do not. I think it's all been covered. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Is it too late to schedule? Is it too late to register for the conference in October?
It's not too late to register. You still can, and it would be lovely to see you all at in beautiful Tennessee. All right. Well, in that case, I want to thank everyone for your time and attention, for participating today. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.